that was the first time we met them. I think I wasn't even there. I think it was Dimitar and Nicola at the time who met Thibaut for the first time. But we've always been very fascinated by the story of Puzl, and you're going to understand why in a second. They grew in a way that's maybe a little bit similar to Republican, aka in their building. But they also have bigger plans that Thibaut is going to talk to us about. So without further ado, I would invite Thibaut to join us again.
Oh,
Hello.
hi, long time no see.
Yeah, surprising. How are you, Thibaut?
I'm very good, thanks. I'm so sorry for barging in. I'll write to him saying sorry. It's just because the topic that you were discussing about is actually really close to the problematics that we currently have. So it was really interesting to see that. Well, we're not the only one, in fact. So that was good. So that's why I decided to, give my point of view.
It's important. I mean, we offer and we put those online events also for that, for allowing interactions between the people who are watching us, but also between our speakers. And there was one thing I really wanted to say when you were talking about, investors and trying to talk to investors. We had like stories of people actually purchasing the book that we wrote about CowOrKing and about all those spaces featured inside, including you guys, as a present to their bank or to their landlords, just to show them that, CowOrKing was a thing and that they should not disregard it or like misjudge it, because it was actually
that makes sense.
And it turned out to be a pretty convincing present.
Yes. A convincing investment. You just said it right. That was a Freudian slip, I think it's called in English.
Yeah, something like that. So it's interesting that you brought up the investing stories, but we are already getting carried away. So let me backpedal a little bit. Because obviously, as the other speakers, I know you and I know your space, but I imagine that some of the people watching us now do not. So can I ask you to introduce yourself and also maybe explain a little bit what you do?
Cool. So my name is Thibaut. I'm French. I've been living in Bulgaria for as long as I can remember, let's say, so probably 14 years. We were an IT startup and we just raised cash and we came. I'm sorry, because that's going to be probably answering part of one of the questions, the next one maybe. So
that's all good.
I go a bit freestyle. So we were looking for an office in Sofia for our IT startup and we could not find one. And we came into this abandoned factory, which is in a really good location in Sofia, fell in love with it, and just simply decided to take it over for ourselves. But because it was too big, we were like, okay, so what do we do? There's extra space. How could we handle it? And we were like, well, you know what? Let's just renovate it all and just invite some friends over. And that's how the CowOrKing story began. I think 7 years ago, probably we're reaching the 8th year, I think. I'm not certain. And then it was a success. Very rapidly, it became successful. And so we've grown over 8 times in Sofia with Puzl CowOrKing. So we had like 8 extensions of the original space. We now have 1,000 seats here. Wow. We are an IT-only co-working. We target companies from 1 to about 300, 250, etc. We sign contracts like short-terms and mid-term contracts also. So, I mean, we need to speak about growth, right? But contract length is also an important factor in the co-working industry that should be really considered early on. And then we launched a second business line, which is Barter Community Hub, which is a complementary business to Puzl, but could also function as a standalone. In the middle of COVID, we purchased a factory in Budapest. It's in a place called Goldberger, an old sewing factory. It's beautiful. Took us 2 years to get licensing because old factories, they're very pretty, but they're very tough. And now we are about to hopefully very soon start renovation. We are in discussion with our bank.
Okay, thanks for the full intro. It will allow us to dive into
I don't know where you wanted me to stop.
That's all good. I mean, now that people have the full picture, we are going to be able to dive into each and every category. So you just said, and please correct me if I didn't get that correctly, but you said you opened Puzl as a co-working 7 years ago, right, in Sofia?
Correct.
How did you guys raised awareness about what you were doing locally? Did you feel like people understood co-working? Was it new to them? How did you approach that?
So first thing first is, what is co-working, right? The thing is that I don't know if I want to get into that conversation, but let's just give it a quick trial. Co-working generally is defined by individual seats and open areas and maybe some offices. So when in reality, co-working is become more and more like a hybrid type of co-working managed offices. So you have small offices, big offices, and open areas. So do you agree that we can define co-working as this, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
In our context, let's do that.
Great. No, because I don't know. Even this as a definition, I'm not certain is existing. So when we started, there was 2 co-workings in Sofia. So we were one of the first ones. But awareness was really easy to raise because, we were one of the first ones. We were the first ones to do like really cool design in the city. Sofia is a smaller city than obviously, Paris or London would be. And also we IT only. So
Yeah.
I think that by focusing on a sector, it makes it much easier to build awareness, because within a close community, everybody knows each other, right? So you just had to approach 2-3 people, and we never did any marketing. We never paid fees like agency fees for members to join, and we've more or less always been full. So we've been lucky to date. Knock on wood, it continues, but awareness was not so difficult, I think. The other thing that we did, I guess I should give you a bit more than that, is from the beginning, we built a very strong brand and communication strategy that we defined as the voice of Puzl. And we created very straightforward rules that are like human in communication. So the way I define it is that the brand of Puzl is a connection or collection of all of our individual personalities, and we write and communicate the way we speak. So we don't try to make marketing which is fancy and polished and pretty, because as a community brand, you need to be close to your audience. You need to present yourself as human beings. And so it was very important for us to actually build a very human-centric communication strategy. And maybe that's also another element that helped us from the beginning build awareness without having too much difficulties doing it.
You also said earlier that you guys grew, is it 8 times? Was it 8, the
Yes.
number? Yeah.
Yes.
So you
I think
said
it's 8. I'm not 100% certain, but 7 or 8.
So
I
let's
like
say
8 as a number.
Okay, so let's say you grew 8 times versus the original opening.
8 times exactly, yes.
So was that actually already planned for you to grow 8 times? Did you want to grow since the beginning, or did it come pretty much naturally in the story of Puzl?
Well, at the start, because we're an IT company, we signed half a floor, which was literally too much. And we even, because ambitious, right? We had an option to take a second floor if nobody took it before us, which was the second part of our floor. So I was like, okay, that way we could take the entire floor. And then not doing it as a business, doing it on the side. And the success was so quick that, we suddenly, I went to my investors and said, okay, guys, what do we do? Should we keep growing? And so at the beginning, it happened out of logic, right? I mean, we were full, we had more demand that we could cater to. So we have the space. We've negotiated very good terms. We want to take it before it disappears. And then from then on, we were like, okay, now if we're doing this seriously, then there's a lot of requirements that we need to be following. And obviously growth is part of it, because we have external investors that invested in Puzl, and they expect returns, and I expect growth. I mean, I'm ambitious, so I want to be growing something large. And I think so it just came naturally. There's also another element to consider, which is important when we're talking about growth and sizes. As I just mentioned before, co-working is day hospitality, and it works like a hotel. And if you take the hotel business, there are sizes that function for a reason. For example, if you take a 3-star or 2-star hotel, anybody in the industry will tell you, and I'm sorry if you get the numbers like by a few rooms off, but it works by number of rooms. So they say that a hotel of 2-star is either 52 rooms, 104 rooms, so it's multiples of 52. And the reason for that is that defines how many rooms can be handled by 1 or 2 persons, by a team. And so if you have 60 rooms, then you don't have a business that's optimized. because it means that there's like you need one more person for those 8 extra rooms. And co-working to a certain extent functions the same way. We need to follow and define, ratios of sizes which are based on the human needs to actually manage our spaces. And size is a very important factor. Like it's very difficult to build something successful if you focus on smaller areas. So we always had this goal of like, okay, now we do it seriously, and we really want to build a co-working and make it into a successful company. And in that case, we need to scale and build large locations.
What's also interesting about Puzl is that you just said you had half a floor and now you're basically scattered across the building. What was challenging growing this way? As in, a bit, because it's not just like linear, you are like a little bit everywhere, if I remember.
Yes, correct. Well, the challenging part is that we don't control the common areas. So when a lift is not working and people come to us and say the lift is not working, like, yeah, we're handling it. We spoke to the owner, but we're not the owners, right? So we don't fix the lift ourselves. The other challenge is what we see is that, we're saying that growing in multiple locations is difficult, right? Because you have two different communities. You care about merging those communities. You want them to communicate with each other. You treat them as completely separated business. So all those problematics come into play. But at the end of the day, having 2 floors is nearly 2 communities. It's already a challenge to connect them. Having 2 buildings is again a challenge to make them communicate and collaborate and connect with each other. So the problematics are mostly making everybody, feel that, they are part of more than just one floor. But otherwise, no, it's okay. The beauty of co-working is that you're probably one of the only business that can go in and, take like some floors in a building and little by little take different floors. Where all the real estate developers, they want the entire building or they want nothing. So that allows co-working operators to approach buildings that are left abandoned because maybe there's like 5-10 owners and only 6 of them are willing to be renting, or maybe 1 wants to sell. So this flexibility is a big advantage for us because it allows us to actually benefit from lower rental terms.
Obviously, growing in size across few floors also meant for you guys that you had to grow the team, right?
Yes.
How big is your team today versus when you started?
So when we started with 1 floor, which was about, I think it was 120 seats, 150 seats at the beginning, we had 1 person. Because we also had the rest of the company helping in managing, right? So we were all here in the event that help was required. Now we have 3 different teams that handle operations. One is the operational team, which is 5 people. We have a facility management team, which is 4 people, and we have the barter team, which is about 6 people, I think, 6-7 people. So the team has grown mostly in functions, but the co-working itself, it's also a question of how you build your space and what is your culture. It has not grown as much as it may have considering the current size of Puzl. I think the architectural studio has grown more, and that's been probably more problematic because then you have all those different cultures and you need to understand how they work together, how they function together, how they collaborate and communicate and all those things.
Another thing you started to talk about a little bit is the cafe, or how do you call it now? Barter
Community Hub.
Okay, Barter. Is this the one we see on the picture?
Yes, correct.
Okay, because I remember that actually Dimitar and I visited it in the very early days that you were opening it. So it actually brings a question in my head that I didn't put in the preparation of this event, but I'll ask it away anyway.
Oh my God. No.
I wanna ask you how the concept grew then, because you said, I remember initially the model was something like pay per hour. Was it something like that?
No, it was pay per day.
Per day.
I didn't want to do pay per hour because that requires technology and a lot more work, frankly.
Okay, so people were basically as you said to Ivan earlier, you were calling it co-cafe, and people were able to, even though they were not part of Puzl as a co-working, they could go to the co-cafe by buying a day pass, basically. And how was the concept grow today?
So that was very complex because it was, number one, very difficult to explain to people walking in. And number two, it's very difficult when you have somebody whose job is being behind the bar to suddenly feel like, okay, now, so let me rephrase that. Either you have one person dedicated to that, who just stands, at the entrance and handles the access and welcomes people and just, handles payment, or which is what we did at the beginning. It was just a F&B team that was also handling that, and it was very difficult for them to handle. It led to more questions than answers, frankly. So we just dropped it. We made it into a cafe in which you can work. That's also a restaurant, and we have an event space, and you have meeting rooms that you can book. So the way this concept is going to evolve, because I guess that's what's more interesting, is that we're going to couple it with a flex desk area. So we will have a separated work area, which in fact we had at one point, but we transformed it into an event space. So we'd have a flex area, which is for work, in which you can actually take a day pass and, fully equipped as an office with a phone booth and proper chairs, seats, etc. And then you have the cafe place, which is louder, in which you can work if you want and you don't need to pay. So we'll be creating those two businesses concurrently, like these two, not businesses, those two services will be running together. But it was very difficult to make it within one standalone room. There's this concept which is called anti-cafe, which I'm sure you know.
They're in the book also, by the way.
Sorry?
They're in the book also. Leonid and the concept are in the book, but now they merged and changed into something else.
Well, so the anti-cafe is for everybody else is it's a cafe in which you walk in and you pay, I think it's per hour, per half a day, and per day, and you get everything inclusive in there. So this is typically the model that's done for those kind of locations, but I didn't like the idea of full inclusive because that forces you to be very careful about quality. Because when you're on a full inclusive model, a hotel can do that because they have the charge of the room, but as a cafe, it makes it very difficult because the price then hold on, but why is it that price? What does it include? But you have lunch here, but I'm not hungry today. I mean, it's much more difficult because resorts that do like full inclusive packages, well, you're inside the resort, there's everything in there. You're not getting out of the resort, so it's something that as a client you can understand. But a cafe, I found it a bit more difficult. So I didn't go into that direction, but it's also one that's working pretty well in the market, I'd say. But is it? I don't know. Yeah, I think so.
Sorry. I mean, it depends where, I have to say, because for instance, when we were in Paris, I was very surprised to see that this concept of coffees, so cafe/office, is actually very popular. Like people do go in those type of, and they pay exactly like you said. And in the book, actually, most of the coffees we have, they come from Paris. So the membership is like, okay, pay per hour, pay per half a day. But it also makes sense because the target audiences they have, it's more like students or people who might be on the go around Paris because they have meetings and everything. And so they can just pop in cafes and they do not seek maybe the full co-working package of like, I want to be in that desk every day, but they rather, they move with the flow, and depending on their needs for the day, they know there is this option. But I think in other cities, it's maybe a bit less popular, or the model might be different. I guess it really depends ecosystem from ecosystem, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And the availability of cafes, and because I'm suspecting that if you go in Paris and you open a piece in a cafe, they're going to get pissed off.
You don't do that. First, there's no Wi-Fi, so how do you do it?
Also.
So, that happened to me once. There was no Wi-Fi, so I'm like, okay, well, then I have my answer.
I got the like really round looks, and I was like for an hour working in a cafe because I was in meetings, and at one point I didn't feel welcome. But that's just our Parisian love for each other.
Exactly.
So no, I frankly we just dropped that, but it doesn't mean it's not a good idea. Maybe it's just not good for the region, as you mentioned. I mean, I'm sure it would work in other places. So I think I'm much more interested in doing to a certain extent the same thing, but based on zonings, like literally. So for me, a bar needs an event space, that can be
Yeah.
utilized during the day as a flex desk area, so working area, so dual usage, private meeting rooms that can be booked, and an area which is the main area for drinks, games, casual workings, lunches, dinners, etc. So I think that it's about boxing your layout to really properly define what is what.
Before I ask you my two reflective questions, I would also like to ask about what's in the pipeline because, as you started to hint, you are into opening in Budapest, but then on your website, you guys also talk about Bucharest. So, can you explain a little bit how is the process of growing in foreign environments going for you guys?
Yeah, of course. So, first of all, something about Puzzle, which is maybe a bit different to most co-workings, is that we go very, very heavily into the renovation. So we're searching for literally abandoned factories or really old buildings, and we fully convert them into offices or workspaces. So that means that for us, the biggest challenge is finding a building that we like. Obviously, so it never really mattered which city we'd be growing into. I have literally a map with like buildings all over the region, and it's always which is the most exciting building for us at the moment, because we feel we're in a very dynamic market, which is really positive. I mean, co-working is still so early in the game, and there's a need for co-working everywhere, and that's further increased with COVID. So we really feel like there's a demand, there's a need, etc. So it's about finding the right building. And for us, the biggest challenge is renovations.
Yeah.
Like what was exceptionally difficult for us when we reached Hungary is finding local renovation partners, finding a local architectural studio, because we have ours in-house, but this is about Bulgarian law. The Hungarian law is slightly different, and so what we do in Bulgaria cannot be done there, etc. So all of this was a big challenge. In terms of operations, we're super structured and organized. So we've been working with Confluence and Jira and knowledge bases for a very long time. So we always wanted to replicate. At the moment we decided that we'll be replicating the model, we built everything to scale. So it's about literally adding another sub page about special specificities to a different location. So I don't think this would be the biggest challenge. To me, it was really renovations.
Okay. Well, then, moving on to the reflective questions. What would you say has been so far the most challenging in your entire growth journey at Puzzle?
Well, I've already said that in the previous one.
So that was the one. Okay.
But
so
I can explain it better if you wish. But that was more or less it, I think. Yeah. I think that what happened is that the biggest mistake, I can call it a mistake, frankly, it's not even a challenge, it's a mistake, is that we were so focused, and I was so focused on building Puzzle as a brand and making a difference and building a beautiful layout and beautiful designs and improving the way we actually work and all those things. That I never considered that when you build a business, you need to consider the investors behind. So it's very important to make sure that you fit in one box. The way investors function is they say, okay, so I've raised money, because it's really your money, right? You just take money from somebody else and you invest it somewhere else. And I've raised it and I'm saying I'm investing this, and this. This is my scope. This is what I can do. This is what I cannot do. And when I built Puzzle, I built what I thought was right. So we designed and created Puzzle in what we believe is the best way for our members, because that's what matters. Mm-hmm. So we IT only, we own the buildings, we have our own architectural studio, we have our own software solution. We are going multiple countries. There's a lot of specificities to Puzzle. Are we an asset manager? Are we an operational business? Are we a F&B business, etc.? And then when I started looking for larger rounds to keep growing the company, I realized that the investors that approach, they go, okay, but you're IT co-working, and that's the scope. Where at the same time, you tell me that you own the buildings, which is different type of investors. I don't know if I'm making full sense. So
yeah, you are.
Okay, because you have private equity, venture capital, and private investors, let's say, which is like angel investors and everything. Venture capital invests in usually fast-growing business with high risk. So probably if we're looking at co-working, it'd be the operational business. And then you have private equity, and private equity invests in slower, more secured business, and that's probably the asset management part of Puzl. And instead of actually focusing so much on our members, I should have taken a step back, looked at the picture, and understood, what needs to be done, how I need to structure Puzl to attract the right investors and to actually directly fall into the actual right buckets, because it's very much a question of buckets. And I've wasted time like pushing, saying no, because I'm, like every founder, most founders, I'm pretty stubborn. I was like, but look, guys, this is perfect. We have a beautiful business. We grew 50% last year. We're profitable. We have a great brand. We have beautiful margins. Let's do it. And even with that, I was like, okay, it's not. It's blocking. There's something blocking, from which I'm taking a step back and now, building it as an umbrella group, considering also creating different brands of co-workings and all these kind of things.
Last question for you then, to wrap up this session. What would be your number one piece of advice for co-working operators watching us today and thinking about growing their space?
Okay. Only one. That's not fair. Can I just say
there
one
can
thing
be more
not...
than one.
I feel much better. One thing that I believe is, since I started Puzl, I've been approached by hundreds, and I do mean hundreds, of property developers and real estate owners who have consistently told me, look, I have a Class A building. I'd like you to take one floor in that Class A building. We can do a management contract. We can do a rental contract. We can give you some fit out money, etc. And I've never accepted that. Maybe I'm wrong, but my opinion is that if you take one floor in a big building, you're going to do all the work for the real estate owner to fill up his building. Mm-hmm. Because you're going to have space with teams that are eventually growing and maybe stepping out of your space and moving into them. And because you are taking expensive spaces where you don't create intrinsic value in the space itself, well, your margins will be very thin, which makes it very risky as a business. So my advice would be, co-working is an operational business, yes. So operations, it's client-facing. It's important to provide a good service. We all have different ways of doing that, and that's perfectly fine. That's the whole point of it, right? You have different experiences, and members will pick the experience which best fit their needs. But do not forget that it is also a real estate business. The biggest failure for all of us is probably WeWork. Is the fact that they didn't have a business case. They took very expensive buildings. They did very basic renovations. And then they came up and started, taking a long-term lease. So they signed a 10-year lease, right? They invest not that much money in it. They break it in pieces and they rent it out in small pieces on monthly contracts. So this is literally called lease arbitrage. So you sign a long-term and you try to make money by renting it. You rent long-term, you try to make money by renting short-term. That's super risky. That is super risky unless you actually do that with like a decent margin to cover, because that means your occupancy is always going to be like this. You're never going to be at constantly at 99% or very rarely. Very few spaces can attain that. So it's important to understand that you need to bring value to the real estate itself. And another advice I can provide, which is similar to that, take the amount that you're investing in renovations, divide it by the lease term. So usually you should always aim at 10 years because it's very difficult to move a community or even buy the space if you can. And calculate how much extra rent per square meter that would be. You will see that actually the cost of renovations over a 10-year lease is 2-3 euro a month. That it's not more than that. So instead of paying 12 or 13 or 14 euros square meter in a Class A building, well, take a building that's costing you 6 euros a square meter, invest 3, and you'll be renting it out at 9. And that's where your margin is. This is where the margin is in the co-working industry.
Cool
So get the right
masterclass.
building at
Thank
the
you,
right time.
Thibaut. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure.
It was really nice to catch up. We are a big fan of Puzl, so always really cool to see where you guys are heading. I would invite everyone interested in learning more about what you are doing to check your website, your socials. Obviously, if they are going to Sofia, they should definitely come by and check the space for themselves.
And they can contact me also. I don't mind helping if I can.
Yeah, okay. So also on LinkedIn, I guess they can add you. Thanks a lot. I think we'll see each other in person very soon. So I'm looking forward to that. And I wish you a nice rest of the day then.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me, and have a great day. And yeah, I mean, you did say next week, but now it seems like, you're trying to wiggle out of that one.
No, it's tomorrow. We see each other in person
you're right.
tomorrow. Yeah. So I'm coming tomorrow. So see you
So
tomorrow.
I'm the one
then.
who's trying to wiggle out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, take care. Thank you so much.
See you, Thibaut. Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.
All right. That's it, guys. Time to wrap things up. As always, I like to call in Dimitar when it's time to wrapping things up to get his perception on how he